Well, in light of that, I want you to turn to the book of Ruth today. And we're going to just spend some time in the first chapter reflecting on Ruth as the backdrop of our reflections on our Mother's Day today. I want to say a couple things just as I get underway to officially just talk about Mother's Day. It's a good thing that our culture keeps this day. It's a complex day for some people. Some day it's a really fun day of remembering Mom. Sometimes for others it's a really difficult day as they remember Mom. And I want to say a couple things here, and I just want to speak to the moms here today about it. And I want to begin. I just realized I stepped up here without my magic wand down here for me to do things that I'm supposed to be doing. I'd have to just be yelling at Jesse back there, and I don't want to do that. But I just want to say Happy Mom's Day to you. But I want to clarify something here. When I speak about moms, I speak not only to those who now have kids or who have kids that are adults and they're out of the house. That's Ron and I. We spent yesterday with one of our adult kids enjoying the zoo yesterday. So we went up there and spent some time with Dominique. So I not only want to speak to you, whether you're biological children or adopted children, whatever it is that you have in your own home, but I also want to speak to all the women who are, by virtue of your age and stage in life and maturity, you function as spiritual moms and examples in this body. You know, it's Jesus who kind of reconfigured the way we think about the church, and He called it a family. And He says this in Mark chapter 10. He says, "Truly I tell you," and here He's speaking to people who by virtue of believing on Him and trusting in Him are being abandoned by their families. Jesus told them in Matthew 10 that when you confess Me, that you're going to find fathers turn against children, mothers turn against their children. You're going to find fathers and mothers and grandparents turn against their siblings and their grandchildren because of the loyalty challenge that comes when Christ invades a home. He says, "Truly I tell you," Jesus says in Mark 10, "no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for Me in the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first." This is why Paul can go on then when he's talking to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 5, and he's giving Timothy advice on how to navigate the world of the church. He doesn't talk about a crowd, he talks about a family. And then he talks about the different people that make up the church as different parts of a family. And so he says this to Timothy: "Do not rebuke an older man harshly if he has to step in the situation that was broken, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, treat older women as mothers, and treat younger women as sisters with absolute purity." So when I say Happy Mom's Day, I'm talking to every woman. If you have children in your home or now that have gone through your home and are out, or whether you're here as a woman today and your age and stage has you as someone that the Scriptures see you as a mom of this church, functioning as a mentor and an example. So there's two things I just want to say to the moms that are here. Two things. First, I want to wish you a Christ-centered Mother's Day. A Christ-centered Mother's Day. And I mean two things by this. Okay, first, you need to put Him right in the middle of your day so that all the expressions of thanks you receive turn into expressions of your own thanks to Christ. As Paul made it clear to the Corinthians, for any follower of Christ, what do you have, moms, that you did not receive by God's loving favor? The good that those who know and love you have experienced through you is there by the grace of God. Receive the appreciation. Now, for some of you moms, you need to receive the appreciation. You need to let your kids and the people in your life look you straight in the eye and say the things that they need to say with you, and don't respond back with some sort of derogatory comment. Just sit there and be humbled and enjoy it, right? They'll know it's a good comment if you weep afterwards, right? So receive the appreciation, enjoy those good words, and then give thanks to God for what He's done in your life for every good thing. Right? Give thanks to Him. So put Christ at the center so that the things that you receive and the words that you get, that you reflect those back to the Lord and give thanks to Him for every good thing that's there. And I say that on the aside, stepping aside from the moms. If you have a mom in your life, you need to say some words of appreciation to her. Right? If you're sitting here, you need to say appreciation to your mom that she didn't abort you. If you're sitting here today, no matter what your background is, you need to express your appreciation to your mom. So that's one of the things here. 2, second, so Christ-centered, give thanks back to God for the good things that are said. And second, I wish you a Christ-centered day so that in the face of any regrets you have, in the face of any current sorrows you bear, or in the face of any disappointments with yourself or others that you are wrestling with, you will turn to Christ and know His forgiveness. One of the things that every one of us knows, there's no perfect people, there's no perfect dads, and there's no perfect moms. We all know that. I know I've joked with you before. I've prayed for my kids as they grow up, and now that they're adults, it's often very interesting to hear my adult children talk about the family that I thought I was living in while they were growing up, right? And they have different pictures of the kind of dynamics of things that happen. And I didn't see it that way, and they're talking to me about that. And I prayed for them that as they grow, that they'll drink deeply of God's grace so that they can extend it back over their mom and dad. So when you come and you're sitting here today and you're facing regrets or sorrows you're bearing today, maybe it's centered around an adult child that's not where you want them to be, or the disappointments you have with yourself or with others that you're wrestling with. Maybe you feel underappreciated. Maybe you don't have anybody recognizing those things. Well, what I want you to do is turn to Christ to know His forgiveness and to hear the assurance of His, and hear these, never failing, transforming, always taking you back love. That's the love of Christ. You need to hear that today. And if there's anybody who's honest with himself, there's nobody who sits here who doesn't have a regret. So whatever it is, go to Christ, ask His forgiveness of those, hear His assurance of His never failing, always taking you back love. Hear that today. And then as you hear His voice of forgiveness and love, may you go to Him again and again, day in and day out, to find wisdom on how to move forward on mission with Him. Your life is not over. The past does not define the present, right? It's not over. Your mission is not done. I don't care whether you're beginning or end, wherever the case may be in terms of life cycle. But you need Him to get back up and re-engage in life. One of the things that's the saddest part about the book of Ruth, and I love the way Kristen portrays Naomi, Naomi's given up on God. Naomi gave up on God. Ruth became the means through which God blessed Naomi, but Naomi wasn't looking for anything from God. She'd given up. So you move forward on mission with Him. You shouldn't be in a puddle of self-pity. You shouldn't be in a puddle of regret as if I blew it all and it's all over. No, the God that transforms you is the God who always transforms, always loves, always restores, always takes back. Grace is a thing that can change at any moment in time. That's why love always hopes. It never gives up. So get back up with the strength of Christ. Get back on mission. You can turn to Him to find guidance and strength to love generously and sacrificially. Right? Turn to Him to find strength to love generously and sacrificially, especially in the face of ungrateful children, especially in the face of ungrateful husbands, especially in the face of a culture that doesn't value mothering. I find wisdom for Him. So I say this, Happy Mother's Day. Put Christ at the center. Go back to Him to get forgiveness and restoration for the things that you regret, the things that you need healing from, and then turn to Him for wisdom and guidance to get back up. Your family needs you. We need you. We need strong, Ruth-like women at EBC. Right? So I want to bless you on this day. Now, let's turn to the book of Ruth. And I just want to talk to you about three things that we're going to find out about Ruth. And I want to challenge all of us, especially the moms here, but I want to challenge all of us. Ruth exemplifies character qualities that we could all appreciate and enjoy, and if we're wise, live out. I started reading Ruth in preparation for our summer series. I think it's maybe 2 or 3 months ago now. I've been living in the book of Ruth and Esther and Ezra now for a long time, and I really, really love this story. And I've been telling people that I hope that one day I'll grow up and be like Boaz. Boaz is just an extremely compelling figure in this story alongside of Ruth as we look at the story. But Kristen made it clear that throughout the events recorded in the narratives and the stories of the Bible, and this is something I want to emphasize, right? The real hero of the book of Ruth is not Ruth. The real hero of the book of Ruth is not Boaz. The real hero is the God that's at work in and around these characters that makes them to the people they are, and often is working despite the failings and the unfaithfulness of other characters. It's God is at work in His providential rule, bringing about His blessings. And as Kristen took us to the end of the book, is that the book hints at the idea that God is at work in this little group of people, in this small little town around Bethlehem. This group of people. They were actually from a smaller town that was attached to Bethlehem that was so small that it just got mentioned in relationship to Bethlehem, Ephrathah. So here's this little nondescript group of people, and all of a sudden God takes His microscope and zeroes down on this little piece of ground with these 2 or 3 people that you might think in the terms of world history and what's going on in the world, this is a pretty insignificant little spot, right? Who are these people and what do they really matter? Well, here, right there in this small little place, these people that seem to be insignificant, God is working through this little group of people to bring about the redemption of the world. It's a crazy story when you think about it. And so God is the one at work, and He's going to work creating the beautiful lives that we see in Ruth and Boaz, and He's going to work despite national and personal unfaithfulness. Okay? And there's just 2 things here that I wanted to mention to you, right? So one is He's working in the face of the unfaithfulness of His own people, right? You read right at the very beginning, and she told you about this here in 1:1, that it's during the time of the judges, okay? Now, when my kids were growing up, there's one portion of the Bible that I didn't read from when the girls were little. You know what that portion was? It was the book of Judges, right? It's like R-rated, right? There's some parts in it that are they're horrible. Absolutely horrible. It narrates a world where God has been kicked to the curb, and the key line that the book ends with is, right, there's no ruler who represents God in the nation, and everybody is doing what's right in their own eyes. And it's just absolute disaster. I was writing about this area here. This is an infamous period when the nation as a whole turned away from God, and each man did what was right in their own eyes. They lived under the thumb of foreign powers, the cursing of the covenant. They had broken the covenant with God, and He brought in nations to punish them, to call them back to Him. So they lived the famous story of Gideon, right? All of the children of Israel, they're trying to thresh their wheat and do everything. They're hiding in caves, and they're trying to keep their crops away from everybody because raiding parties are coming in, stealing all the crops, ruining the fields, because they live under the thumb of foreign powers. It was a time of famine and poor crop yield. God had shut up the land to them. And even if they had a crop, they often had it stolen from them by the surrounding nations. It was a dangerous time for anyone. Life had little value as people scrambled to survive in whatever way they thought best. I had some ugly pictures. It was especially dangerous, here, and listen, it was especially dangerous for women. This was a use and be used world as men and women, they jousted for control and they fought for survival. Sexual debauchery, rape, abuse, the manipulation of men and women of each other, right? The famous story of Samson and Delilah. Who can manipulate the other person to get what they want? And Delilah wins. Yet God still, He's at work. He's not abandoned His people when you're thinking there's absolutely no reason why God would want to stay with these people. And so here God is right in the midst of that. You put your lens right down on this little place in Bethlehem where all of the nation looked like it's going to hell in a handbasket. And here is God right down here. It says, I haven't given up. My loyal love is still with you. Right? And I don't know if you feel like that, like your life is like the book of Judges. And you wonder if God sees you in the middle of it. Right? Well, God is providentially at work in the midst of chaos here. Right? Self-inflicted chaos. So you see His providence there. And then you see His providence in the beautiful lives of the people that He's working through. God does His work through people. Right? God, this sovereign God, He just doesn't work from outside and do things and force these things. No, He works through the hearts of people to accomplish His purposes. Right? And then notice here, even though Naomi has not turned from God, right, it certainly sounds like she's given up on Him. Right? It certainly sounds like she's given up on Him. Now, listen to her words again from chapter 1. Right? I love the way that Kristen put them here. Right? She says, Naomi says, verse 11, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, which I don't think. Even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for me? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand is turned against me. Then, right, when she even arrives back in her hometown, right, as a widow, has lost her 2 sons, lost her husband, she arrives back. Everybody's excited to see her from the tone of it. Oh, there's Naomi, she's back home. Well, Naomi gives them a very encouraging greeting, right? And Naomi here, her name means pleasant or lovely. And she's going to make a play on her name here. She said, don't call me Naomi. There's nothing pleasant and lovely about my life. Don't call me Naomi. Right? Call me Mara. Call me the bitter one. Call me the bitter one. Because the Almighty, the God who has all the power, the God who has all the power to do everything, the Almighty has made my life bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? There's nothing pleasant or beautiful about my life. The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. She feels like her life is over as the story opens. God is against her. She cannot even recommend her God to her daughters-in-law. Think about that. She can't even recommend her God. It would be better for them to return to Moab and their gods than to come to her country and her God. I'm not going to recommend my God to you. Look what He's done to me. Even if her life had earlier recommended Yahweh. And this is the question here. How did Ruth become a follower of Yahweh if Naomi was the evangelist? That's what I'm asking. Right? I mean, that would be the greatest, my God hates me, He's afflicted me. Why don't you follow Him too? And you're going, I don't think so. Right? So how on earth did she get there? Well, at one point in time, there must have been something in Naomi, something in Elimelech, something in Mahlon or Chilion that made the God of the Jews attractive to Ruth. Something. But what we do know is that Ruth is in hook, line, and sinker, and she knows this God. Right? So whatever at one point in time was true of Naomi, so that Ruth became a follower, there is little of any deep trust or faith in God on display in Naomi's life now. That seems to be all in the past. She lives at the bottom. If you want to read the lament psalms, it's like Naomi lives right at the bottom of one of the lament psalms. Right? Right in Psalm 73, one of my favorite ones. Here's right at the bottom. Psalm 73 is Asaph, the leader of the choir in the temple that's supposed to be praising God. He's having his own lament psalm moment, and the first half of the psalm is Asaph falling spiritually head over heels right into a hole. And this is where he winds up at the bottom of the hole. Verses 13 and 14. Surely, right here it is. Come here. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure. I have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments. Well, there's Naomi. Now, in the contrast, right, to Naomi, so God's loving them over against the nation that's in chaos that's left him. God's loving them over against people who are his followers but have given up on him. Right? So God's providence is still moving. His loyal love is still coming toward them. But then it gets displayed and most beautifully in Ruth and the people who are actually living it out. So they're committed to Yahweh. Right in the middle of this chaos, what are they doing? They're following God. And God's character is evident in their life. Ruth becomes and Boaz become an embodiment, a picture of what God's loyal love looks like. They picture it. They get to see that, yeah, God is at work. Why? Because He's transformed these two people that in the face of all the unfaithfulness, in face of all the difficulties and things we've inflicted upon ourselves by our unfaithfulness, here they are loving God and staying true to Him. Boaz is a man of integrity. Ruth is a person who just loves generously and sacrificially at her own expense. And none of that behavior makes sense unless God has really transformed them. So they get a picture of that. And you can't, this is that famous place in Ruth, right? Ruth 1, where you get a picture of this kind of loyal love. Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. So, God is at work. He's the hero of the story. He's going after people who have rejected Him, a nation. He's even loving people in the face of the fact that, God, I've given up on you, right? And you're against me. And they're completely deriding His character and turning their back on Him. And in the midst of that, God still is working powerfully in the life of Ruth and Boaz. And He's going to work through them and eventually through their heritage to bring about the salvation of the world. So God's loyal love, the Hebrew term is the term hesed. God's loyal love is underlying everything that happens here. And it gets displayed in Ruth. So as we look at Ruth, I want to look at three things about Ruth. And they won't be long because our time is short today. But three things that Ruth demonstrates. And as we look at that, I just want to commend these character qualities to us and reflect on them just for a moment. Okay, first, you'll see it here. Ruth loves those in her life with the loyal love of God. Ruth loves those in her life with the loyal love of God. Naomi, who encourages Ruth and Orpah out of an embittered soul to do what Naomi thinks is best for their futures, praises them both for their devotion. Right? So if you look down in verse 8, she praises them both for being people who showed her kindness, that they didn't immediately bolt when their husbands died. Okay? Now, I don't know if you, just as an aside here, Ruth herself has been married by this time upwards of maybe 10 years. And Ruth has been barren herself. So Ruth has plenty to grieve, okay, at this moment. However, it's Ruth who lives up to her namesake. Ruth's name means friend. It's Ruth that lives up. She truly demonstrates the loyal love that is God's love by committing to stay with Naomi and not return to her former life and her former gods. As one writer puts it, despite Naomi's bitter tirade, she insists on staying. Right? Some of you, right, you are loving your moms in the face of all kinds of behavior that doesn't demand any kind of respect. And the only reason that you're there is because the love of God moves you toward them, because you want to see them come to life. You want to see their life restored. You want to see them to come into the joy of what God wants to give them. And so you push into moms who weren't good moms when you were young. You push into the lives of mom who abandoned you. You put into the lives of mom contra to what was said by about many of the moms who never put you first. Right? And so here is Ruth coming toward a woman who's just full of bitterness, full of a grief that's gone sour. And on a human level, we can understand it. She's pushing her away from her God, from everything. And Ruth moves toward her in a way that doesn't make sense to anybody. And it's because she has a loyal love that goes beyond this immediate one, and she's after something for good for Naomi, despite the way she's behaving. So Ruth loves those in her life with a loyal love from God. So despite her bitter tirade, Naomi, she insists on staying. Orpah is a good person, but Ruth is beyond good. She possesses an extra measure of devotion and sacrificial love that is uncommon. She demonstrates the very loyal love of God that's marked by faithfulness, loyalty, commitment, and devotion. One of the things that's so characteristic about the love of God is it does not abandon. It doesn't abandon. Right? So the first thing, Ruth loves those in her life with the loyal love of God. And second, Ruth's love for God and others does not waver in the face of adversity. Right? In fact, this is where genuine love shows up. Right? When it's tested. Love that's God's love doesn't just exist when the flowers are blooming and things are going well. It exists when it's raining and storming. So she wants to stay loyal to God and God's people in the face of real adversity. Now follow this with me. To be loyal to God and His people is the only option for Ruth. She doesn't consider any other option. On a human level, right? Consider her choice from a human level. To stay in a place where there is no famine, that's where she's at in Moab. There's no famine. She just hears a report now about Judah. She doesn't know she's never been there. She doesn't know anything about it. So to stay in a place where there is no famine, among her own people, and with an extended family that provides more of a safety net in times of adversity, that would only make sense for Ruth. She knows her people in Moab. She's got family here, so you'd want to go there. But to go off with a grieving, near embittered widow, right? If you want to survive hard times in the ancient world, you usually don't hang around widows. Right? You got that? Right? They're the most vulnerable people at the bottom. So then to take off on top of that with an embittered widow. So I'm going to go off with an embittered widow in a time of adversity, who sees herself, and even the adversity, the widow sees herself, Naomi, as if she's under attack by the God of the land that she's going to, right? So Naomi's embittered. She thinks God's against her. Now you're going to go back to the country where that God is the God in their minds, to a place she's not seen, to a people who historically, right, the Moabites were hated by the Israelites, and it was shared equally between, all right, on both sides. And in the history of the dealings between Moabites and Israelites, the Moabites were one of those tribes that were so heinous in what they had tried to do to Israel to wipe them out, to try to spiritually undermine them, that they were banned from the precincts of the temple for 10 generations. Now she's going to go back with an embittered widow to a God who's against this widow and the widow's mind, and she's going to go back to a people who are the mortal enemies of her own people. That doesn't make sense unless she believes in the Yahweh that Naomi believes in. That's just the only way it makes sense. So you find here that Ruth is committed to Yahweh. And it extends beyond. The only thing that you do when you get in adversity, if you're a follower of God, is that you just turn to Him again and again. Because He's the only means to deliver. He's the only wisdom to get you through it. Right? So the first one, Ruth loves those in her life with the loyal love of God. Ruth's love for God and others does not waver in the face of adversity. And then finally, Ruth did what love required at the moment and left the big picture up to God. And this is one that really gets me. Right? If you're looking at Ruth and her current situation in the ancient world, she doesn't have much hope of survival or of anything good if she goes back to Judah. If she stays here, there's the potential with her own people that she could get a second husband and move back into a home where she could find rest or security, right, in the ancient world. That looks very possible where she is. There's prosperity in Moab at this particular period of time, not famine. So all that looks sense. Now she's going to go back with a widow who all of her extended family is dead. She doesn't have any hope for a spouse coming from there. She's going with a person that her survival looks very unlikely. But Ruth doesn't have anxiety about her future. She just does what love demands in the present. She said, well, I need to stay with God and God's people. That's all I know. Right? Some of you are in moments where things are crazy, and I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't even know what's going to happen this afternoon. The only thing that I do know is that God is ruling and reigning, and the only way you're going to make it is if you get on your knees and keep going back to Him. You open His Word, you listen to His advice, you gather around God's people and say, help me navigate through this. I think I'm losing my mind. That is the will of God. That's the only thing you know. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know where the next day is going to take me. I don't know how many years I have left. But what I do know is that today the only way to truly live is to do what God asked me to do today. That's all I know. And that's all Ruth knew. And so she didn't think about, but she wasn't this long interlude of her thinking through all the possibilities. She said, no, I serve God, and I want to be with His people. And I want to go there with Naomi, and I'm committed to her, and I'm going to do that. She doesn't think about, and somebody said, hey, but Ruth, do you think you're going to survive that? And she said, it doesn't matter. I know what is I needed to do in this moment. I need to stay faithful. That's all I know. And so she doesn't bracket. She doesn't get in a moment of self-pity, right? And notice Ruth, right? You have one of those moments like you felt with different people where you get out in your face, shut up, Naomi. I got stuff to grieve too. Shut up. No, but get up. You stick whining there in the corner, Naomi. Other people got problems too, Naomi. Get up. Right? Have you had other people say that to you? Maybe you felt like saying that to somebody. Right? And you restrained yourself. And Ruth has all kinds of grounds. She lost her husband too. She's barren too. She doesn't have any kids. She's turned her back on her own culture. It would be difficult to return, but possible. Right? All that kind of stuff is in here. And Ruth is not concerned about herself. She just needs to follow Jesus. Or the God of the Old Testament here. That's all I need to do. So when I look at Ruth, I'll put it this way. God had found Ruth. His loyal love was at work as He carried out His plans to reclaim and restore all things through Ruth and in those around her. God had found her. Ruth had been changed by God to love others with the loyal love that she had received from God herself. She loved devotedly. She loved generously. She loved sacrificially. And Ruth stayed with Yahweh in the face of adversity. With the God of the Old Testament, she stayed with Him. Ruth clearly had made Yahweh her God. She chose to do what someone who trusted in God would do, even when it did not seem to be the most sensible thing to do. She stayed with God and those who followed Him. In the good and bad, she stayed with the Lord Almighty and with His people. That's what she did. And then Ruth did what the day required and left the big picture up to God. She left the big picture up to God. Now, I mentioned to you, I know I've done this before, but I remember being in a group with a group of women and asking them what was one of the key verses that they had kind of kept as a kind of a red thread that run through their life. And about 50 or 60% of the women in there all said the same verse. And the same verse was, don't be anxious for anything, but with prayer and supplication, give your request to God and let the peace of God rule in your hearts. Right? Ruth had all kinds of reasons to be anxious, fretting about her future. But that was not hers, was to love generously and to act purposely right in the face of these difficulties. Here's what I hope we'll carry away today. Here's what I hope. The beautiful life of Ruth is nothing more than God's transforming love on display through her. As God's people, the story of Ruth makes it clear that moms can bring blessing to their church family and the family in their home by anchoring their lives to God's love and surrendering to His loving demands. Ladies, your children, and I say children here as the people here in this church as well as those in your homes, they need women who choose God and hold on to Him as good and loving no matter what. You say that again. We need women who choose God and hold on to Him as good and loving no matter what the circumstances. They need moms who are anchored and surrendered to God's loyal love so that they can love like Him through thick and thin. All right, any of you that are adult parents have adult kids, you know that you're never done being a mom and dad. Right? I thought we had one. It was pretty exhausting and crazy and scary. Had two, a little bit more. Three, a little bit more. Four, a little bit more. And I thought it was kind of hard and difficult when they were young, and then they got to be teenagers, and then it got really hard. right? And then it got more complex. Things came into the picture like men, right, which were bad for like 15, 16 years. And then all of a sudden I had to make them good again. Well, all those kind of things like that, they're trying to figure out. A lot of time on my knees, a lot of prayers, a lot of worries, a lot of concerns, a lot of tears, happy moments. I pray for my girls as hard as I've ever prayed. They're all big girls. They're all out. By God's grace, they have good men in their lives, and they're moving on. But I don't take for granted that where they are today, they'll be there tomorrow. The world doesn't cheer for them, doesn't want their marriages to succeed, doesn't want them to know Christ and follow Him. Right? And I want them to become women who love the Lord and choose Him no matter what. So I want them to come. And I just end with this thought from Matt Redman's song. You guys know this. This is Ruth. As I kept thinking about Ruth, I kept thinking about this song as this phrase that we know from Matt Redman's song, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." It's almost as if Ruth sings this song to us. Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful, where your streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. But also, blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place. Though I walk through the wilderness, blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name when the sun's shining down on me, when the world's all it should be. Blessed be your name. And Lord, blessed be your name on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. Moms, church family, whether the Lord gives or takes away, He's worthy of our love, our trust, and our obedience. He is the only safe place. He's the only path to follow. He's the only one that truly is at work in and around all the darkness of life to bring about true deliverance. And He provided for it through Ruth, a barren woman, that He provided the heir of David, so that David could be the heir of Jesus, so that we could be the heirs of God. God help us to trust Him. Ladies, thank you for every way that you have loved as Christ. And may God enable us all to love as He loves. All right? Van, would you come?